G'day, I'm Nick Clements from York US and welcome to our podcast, Beyond the Guesstimate. I've been in the construction sector since 1993 and pretty much the whole time I've been frustrated with how inefficient the sector is and the opportunities for improvement within it. When I joined the construction sector from being a sales engineer in industrial manufacturing, where I worked with companies like New Zealand Steel, aluminium smelters, meat works, dairy factories, that sort of thing. So businesses that were 24/7. And something I've found that's very different with the construction sector is it's quite adversarial in the approach. Well, certainly I felt it was when I first joined, compared to those industrial manufacturing businesses where the fact that they were running all the time, the relationships with their suppliers and with people were so much more important to them. I think I've got a couple of examples to talk through. So one, we worked with New Zealand Steel and they'd had a problem with these rubber bellows things. And they did them to me and said, can you do anything with these? And I initially thought I couldn't. But then I was working with one of our suppliers and was just chatting with a beer after work one day. And they were telling me about how they used to make rubber tyre prototypes for the automotive industry. And I realised that wasn't a million miles away from these bellows. So I took them these bellows and said, can you make these? And we figured it out and made them and started producing them for New Zealand Steel. And then a little bit later, a few months later, I had a phone call late one day saying, we've had this bellows explode. Can you come and have a look at it and see if you can do anything with it? And it was like a metre in diameter. These other ones we'd been building were sort of 300 or 400 millimetres. And the replacement was 3 months away from Germany, and a plant like New Zealand Steel was $250,000 an hour or something. And so it was just a no-go for them, the options they had. And so they said, can you do anything? So I go to my guys and said, can we do something? And we thought we probably could. And New Zealand Steel said, just whatever it takes, 24/7. So we had guys working on it the whole time. We developed them. I can remember the nerves when we moulded the first one because we had no idea when we opened the mould up whether it was going to work or not. But it did work and got New Zealand Steel out of trouble. And after that, they started replacing them every 6 months to make sure. So they were willing to trust us, trust our relationship. It wasn't about price. It was about getting a solution for them that worked. Another example, which actually does involve New Zealand Steel, but later on in my career where I was consulting to them as marketing manager, and we worked with Kiwi Rail to develop some steel beams for container wagons. And we spent quite a few months working with them, refining the design of them, getting it so they were efficient for us to produce and that they worked for them. And then they brought this project manager when they came to do the production run of, it's going to be 35 wagons, which was going to be 70 beams for us. They brought a project manager in from the construction sector. And of course, he stuck it out to tender and some steel fabricator was cheaper than us and poof, it was gone. And I don't think it worked out that well. I can't remember exactly how it panned out. I sort of dropped it after that. But you got to wonder, okay, if they came back to us with another opportunity in the future, would we be willing to invest so much in that relationship and so much in developing a solution for them if we knew it was going to go to tender and the lowest price was going to win it? And that's sort of a bit of a difference for me between the construction sector and other sectors. Is the construction sector is very much project by project, and often the people involved in those projects take a project view and don't really think the longer term. And as suppliers into that, how much are you going to invest in a relationship and improving systems and processes, improving that interface between the supplier and the project? If you know the next one, you may not lose it, you may not win it because you aren't the cheapest. And I reckon that's one of the reasons why the construction sector lags a bit behind manufacturing and other different sectors is we have this adversarial job-by-job approach to things rather than taking a long-term view. So as a counter to that, so I'm involved in an industry organisation, the Institute of Quantity Surveyors, and I see a lot of our role is trying to develop the broader business skills of people within the construction sector, so our members, so they take more of a strategic view to things. And that's through developing CPD programs, developing training to try and broaden the skills beyond just those pure technical skills, but the sort of other 80% of skills that you need to be able to run a business. So I guess today is also involved in an industry body. So he's with Certified Builders. And I know that they put a lot of time and investment into looking to try and develop their builders as business people more than the technical skills of building, because most of them already know it because they're building practitioners. So I'd like to welcome today Nick Farrelly, who's got a business, Edgecity Builders, and is also the current chair of Certified Builders. So welcome, Nick. I guess the first thing to say is, congratulations on being so well named. I mean, Edgecity. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. I thought it was Nick.
So how did you come up with Edgecity?
Yeah, it was interesting. We had at the time, a couple of things going on. One was we had a contract with the old Waitakere City Council, and I had a dog called Edge, and he was named after the bass guitarist out of Bono, out of U2.
Lead guitarist.
Lead, yeah. So lead guitarist. And anyway, we were right. We bought a property, and we were based out of a property which was basically the demarcation between Waitakere City and Auckland. It was right on Newland by the creek, right. And we thought, hey, we're right on the edge of the city here because it ties in with the dog. Bang, that was it. It was really quick. Like it was discussed and done in about a smoko break, and that was it. It was done. Right. Yeah, and it stuck. And people think, oh, that's a great name now, and they talk about it, and we try and tell them that it was a lot of time and effort, and you spent a lot of money. Yeah,
exactly.
But yes, none of that went on.
So how long you had Edgecity for then?
So Edgecity's been going. This is the 25th year. Right. We celebrate 25 years this year. So it's been a journey. It's been great, and we've seen the industry chop and change over that time.
So what got you into the building industry to start with?
To start with was that I did like a gateway program through school, which basically and it sent me off to see what it was like to work in a trade, and actually did cabinet making, funny enough. Right. Went and did the old cabinet making 1 day a week and really enjoyed it, and was offered an apprenticeship. And the business sold when I'd finished school, and the new owner said he's going to give his son the apprenticeship that was there. So I ended up not doing it. So I basically then applied for cabinet making apprenticeships and building, and I ended up getting offered both, cabinet making on one hand and building on the other. And one of the good advice that my father gave me was that my patience level probably not quite so good in the old cabinet making, and also cabinet making was going through a massive change. Huge change where you look at it now with all the 3D printing and stuff.
Yeah,
so it was huge, and it was even back then it was changing quickly. Yeah. So took up the apprenticeship that I had with a company called Macmillan and Lockwood.
Oh, okay,
been around for a while. Started in Palmerston North. They're still around. They've come back to Auckland. Funny enough, so
they're more commercial construction.
Yes, and they also had a residential arm, and they were doing modular homes. So you got the best of both worlds. It was really good.
And so you did your time with them?
I did my apprenticeship with them, and those were the days when my foreman, when I finally completed my apprenticeship, and he sort of came up to me and said, "Oh, Nick, did you know that at 2:00 this afternoon you finish your apprenticeship?" And I thought, "Oh, great." And he said, "And by the way, it's your last day." So it was like, "Oh, crikey!" But I left and I could get a job straight away. There was no issue with that. But he always said to me that if you stayed, you'd always be the apprentice. And I took that on board, because I always say that my hardest year ever was my first year out of my apprenticeship as a builder. Right. Because no one knew me as anyone but a builder.
So you went out on your own at that point? Or?
No, I didn't. I went and worked for a company doing finishing work. And with those, just working, because I'd always intended to do my OE. Right. And so I went and saved up and worked for those guys. But that year was huge in the growth of being an actual carpenter itself. And in those days, they used to have a thing called a journeyman. You sort of finished your apprenticeship, you did a couple of years as a journeyman. And I really think that's something that we should go back to, because boy, oh boy, I learned a lot in those.
So what a journeyman was that? You're working for different?
You're working for someone else, but as a builder. Right. So so you're not own the company, you don't do anything, but you're actually a journeyman. Then you become a tradesman. So you're not an apprentice, you're not a full qualified in running jobs, but you were in between, and it was called a journeyman, which was great.
Right. And how long were you working for that company for?
I worked for just over a year. Yep. And then I decided to do an OE. I went over to Australia for a little while. I was actually racing motorbikes, funny enough, and I got sponsored to go over to Australia. And then from there, I decided to go to England, and it was just what everyone did. And we sort of said to a lot of our friends, "Oh, we'll see you in London." And of course, you ended up there at some stage. And I worked for a lot of companies over there, and some really good companies doing all building. In Australia, all building. It was a great trade. You could just take basically your penny and your level, and away you went. And it was really, really good. It was a great trade for travelling, hugely employable wherever I went. My other mates were doing all sorts of crazy jobs, and I was able just to basically carry on building, and when I was particularly in England, got to do some really cool work on old churches and stuff, which was really, really good.
And so how long did you spend overseas? 2
years.
Right.
Yeah, it was only going to be like for 4 or 5 months, but ended up having a motorbike accident in Australia. So I was like, oh, great, well, I'm sort of getting better. I might as well carry on. Went over to England and went from there. So it was good.
And when you came back to New Zealand, I presume you came back from England?
So I came back in sort of 1990, and the old market had really dropped. It was a terrible time to come back. One of the things that stayed with me when I was in Australia was that I was working for a guy who was a really tough boss, and ex-Vietnam vet, had some crazy ideas. And there was an old guy there, I look back now, I thought he was really old. He's probably about 50, I thought, well, you're old, and he was there having to work. He needed the work to come in. He was on hand and knee. His boss sort of said one day, look, where's your spader and have it, we'll just use your hands. And he did that, and I thought, man, I don't want to be in that place when I'm that age. I really don't. So I have to sort of come up with a plan. So when I returned, it was kind of forced because I returned in 1990, and it was a terrible time for the construction industry. And I returned, basically started doing fences, painting houses, repairing the rotten weatherboards. There was just not a lot of work around during that phase. And it kind of forced me, because there was no employment. So you kind of had to actually either get out of the trade or set up business. And that's where it was. So
that's when you started your own business?
Yep, started to set up your own business. Just in those days, you didn't do limited companies. You were a sole trader and stuff. And
so doing some maths, that was before Edgecity then?
Correct. Yep. So did quite a bit of that, and a lot of oddball work and all that sort of stuff. And then decided once we got a little bit more serious that we'd set up, obviously, a little while after Edgecity.
Right. So you were doing just sort of smaller jobbing type stuff?
Smaller jobbing, a little bit of smaller alterations, which seemed huge at the time. You were like, whoa. And interestingly enough, I had a really good break by a great architect called John Sinclair, and he gave me a break to build this reasonable size extension, and it was sort of the start of it. That's when I got the passion, went, this is great, I'm really enjoying this.
So were you working by yourself, or did you start having a team?
Started off working with myself and then got an apprentice. I think you could probably throw that over a lot of our industry. And then after that started to got other people involved, and I grew a team of about 5 for quite a long time, and thought, well, now I need to take it pretty seriously, because it's other people's lives you're dealing with.
Yeah. So how did you find that transition from working for somebody to getting into your business and getting it going? What was sort of the most challenging aspects of that phase of your life?
I think I think it was actually really difficult. I found it it's really easy when you're told what to do all day long. Go and hang that door, but to find the work was probably something that builders probably aren't so good at, because when you work for somebody, you turn up in the morning and you sort of rub your eyes and you go, right, you're pitching the roof today. Great, no problem. But then, what happens after that job's finished? That was the most difficult time. And to keep that continuity going, that was really, really challenging. And not only for yourself, but for working out that for yourself and an apprentice, you don't need a lot of work to keep you busy.
Yeah.
But for 4 or 5 guys, you can chew through some work. You can really start banging it out, and you can become really inefficient if you've got too many guys or not enough guys on a job. So, that was that part of it I found really, really challenging, and also the business side of it quite challenging, accounts and all that stuff as well, because you predominantly did it after hours. You didn't do it during the day.
Then you have to stay on top of it. You can't afford to let it slip.
That's
Invoicing clients, understanding cash flow,
all that sort of stuff, which, I look forward now, and it's no different for new builders starting today as what it was back in 1992. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, and sort of one of the things I feel a lot, and what I do with NZIQS is in technical trades like ours, we focus on the technical skills in our training. So all of our training is based around that. Yet a lot of us are destined to own our own businesses. And I keep saying that the technical skills are about 20% of running a business. We need to pick up the skills on the other 80%. And your trades, typically trade training doesn't cover a lot of that. So you get tipped in the deep end a bit like you did, and you got to figure your way through it. And it's no easier now, I think, than what it was back when you were starting yours.
Very problematic. There's a lot of issues that happen, and I absolutely agree, is that it's kind of hard to find when is the right time to tell someone or to teach someone about a business owner. Is it during their apprenticeship? Some people believe it's not. They're there to learn how to hang a door, know plumb and level and measure and that sort of stuff. Is it in that journeyman phase, which I was talking about, which I think it is. That's my personal belief, but I think that's a really important phase. So it could be like a journeyman,
another qualification after apprenticeship?
Yeah, because there isn't any qualification. And speak to our brothers and sisters in plumbing and electrical, they have the same problem, exactly the same, because that's kind of you fall into it, or you have a great wife at home who does all that sort of stuff, and that's important. The back house is huge. And one thing on certified builders is that we are doing a lot more of the back end of building, rather when they know, like you said in your intro, they know how to build. There's no problem. There's not too much that they don't know they can't find out pretty quickly. Yeah. But running that business, knowing about holiday pays, knowing about quoting, all that stuff of what you got to do in timelines. Someone comes and asks for a Gantt chart and they wouldn't have it. Jeepers, I better learn quick. All that sort of stuff is things that we need to train, but where do we fit that in?
So from reading up about you and doing a bit of stalking you on internet, I see you're also involved in the territorials. So how long were you, or what got you into that, and how long were you doing that for?
Well, it was an interesting story. I said to my dad, look, I want to join the army. That's what I wanted to do. It was sort of like my goal. I wanted to leave school and join the army, and in my head was to go and kill people in the jungle. My dad said to me, hey, well, son, what you should do is get a trade behind you. Join the territorials at that time, so you got an interest. It's very easy to change from the territorials to the regular force, but get a trade. It's really important. And two really good bits of advice from my father was, one, don't do joinery, do carpentry, and don't join the regular force army. That was really great. Yeah. So I joined that up. And in those days, when you did your apprenticeship, if you went away for annual camps and stuff, those hours still came, because it was hours-based apprenticeship, those hours came off your time. Oh, right. So if you went away to Wairu and walked around the jungle, right, in Wairu, you would get 40 hours a week taken off your time. And it was a good break away. It was something different. I didn't go in and join the engineers and become a carpenter. I went and joined the Signal Corps, learned about radio, something totally different. And it became real quick, a real passion. And I loved it tremendously. And I would recommend anybody to go in there. You learn some great skills, which a lot of those skills went side by side as I was growing up as a person, because you get promoted and you do promotional courses. And in those days, you couldn't do a building course or a course to go and learn about certain man management or woman management and all that sort of stuff. You just didn't happen. Where the military was hot on that from day one, and you get promoted through the ranks and stuff, and you learn more and more and more. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a big part of my life. I gave a lot of time towards it. I was fortunate enough to go and serve a couple of tours in East Timor when it was at the forefront of everyone and everything at the time. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and like I said, I would recommend it to anybody who wants to do something a little bit different, but actually sharpen your professional skills.
Yeah, it's something I've not had direct exposure myself to military, but I've got a couple of mates like you that have been through the territorials in particular, and they seem to have got a better grasp on. So obviously there's technical skills. You've got to know how to shoot a gun or fire a cannon or whatever. So you've got technical skills, but then they also put quite a lot of focus into the man management and other skills around it. So they don't, like we do in industry, just focus on the technical skills. They do actually do a more complete training. So is there stuff that we could learn as an industry or industries from how the military approach things?
Certainly, there are some really good things. And as you grow into things, you start off as a soldier. If I put it into real basic terms, you start off as a soldier, and then all of a sudden you get promoted to a corporal, and you're marching people around. You're actually making sure they turn up to things turn up to particular task on time. You're in charge to make sure they have all the equipment there, and it's not dissimilar to someone who stepped up from being a on the tools to a leading hand. Very similar, but to get to that point, you do a lot of courses as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that they obviously then, I presume they do training.
They do. You go away for like a 2-week course, and you learn all that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden you go up to a sergeant, which is kind of the next step up, and you go away and do another big long course, and you learn all about that next level, and then you go up to which is equivalent to running a business, where you become a warrant officer, and you all of a sudden are looking after the bigger scheme of things, and they do really good courses. And I think you did right of getting that. Mind you, the military had a lot of experience, so they know how it goes,
and resources.
Exactly, and resources, and they're very task focused, so it's quite good. But certainly in our construction industry, absolutely, there must be times when we could. That's what I was saying about, you don't want to teach an apprentice how to run a site in his third year. It just wouldn't work. But maybe if we get that timing better, we could learn a lot from the military.
So what sort of size team have you got now in Edgecity?
So we're running a crew on the ground of 10. And out of that 10, we actually have, we don't have any labourers. And once upon a time, labourers were quite popular in small businesses. We don't have labourers. Everybody's either an apprentice or they're trade qualified. And we believe that's really important, and that you can pass on to the apprentices all the day-to-day skills that they need to have. And hammer hands and those sort of things have gone because trades were, people didn't do. So many of my friends early on would do their apprenticeship up until their third year, and then they'd leave because they got offered bigger money to go. People have actually grasped that the qualification is actually worth more long term, so you don't get that as much. So most people are qualified or about to be qualified.
Training to be qualified.
That's right.
Yeah. So that step from sort of 5 to 10 in your team means that I guess you're not on the tools anymore. And correct. Typically they say in a business that when you get to about 8, you're then ending up with somebody that's able to focus on the business rather than be in the business. So would that be right? You're not so much on the tools now? Absolutely.
And I think I learned the hard way on that one. I had a really large project, which was about 18 months, and I worked on that project full time for that 18 months. And what actually happened was we had the whole team in there. When it came to finish, people didn't even know we were around. They thought we had either gone or left, I was working in the business and not on it. And I really got a sharp lesson that you have to work on the business because it's a big team and you chew through the work, as we said earlier, but you've really got to work on the business. And that was my real big wake-up call, that although it's nice to be on the tools and and I enjoyed it and you can charge yourself out at an hourly rate, it's not actually sustainable. Yeah, you have to actually do it. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it's a curve, and that suddenly at some point in the curve you've got to make that call, and invariably you're having to make that call probably a bit before you're comfortable to. So effectively you're taking capacity out of the business to be able to make it available to work on the business, and it's always a tricky point where that happens. So.
Well, I still drive a van around. I've got a high-ace van, be it only 9 months old, but I can't get rid of my high-ace vans. I love them, and I've got tools in it. Now, if you ask the guys on site, they shudder to think that I'm going to put my apron on and actually come and help them, But it's like you said, it is so difficult to get rid of that mentality. I'm a craftsman by heart, and that's what I was brought up on. But it is hard, but you need to do it, and I hark back to the military. That discipline of actually knowing what your role is actually really important, because if you don't know what your role is, you can't actually complete the task in front of you. And, the be-all doing everything all the time doesn't work. Two things will happen. One, you'll burn yourself out because you end up being on the tools during the day, going home, working frantically, doing everything else and trying to organise everything else, which never works because your clients have a life too. They don't like to be rung at 8 at night to say, by the way,
what colour
curtains or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't, so that will happen. They want to actually be asked during normal time. Of work times to discuss that sort of stuff. And you can't ring up architects, you can't ring up anybody sort of after 8 o'clock. But it still happens today. There's still a lot of people doing that. And I suppose the most difficult part is those that are transitioning through that stage, but it's been a little bit of a hiccup. I've known people who've gone too early, decided to go off the tools, and they don't have enough people actually churning through the work. So it is a really tough. Timing is everything in that market. And deciding yourself that you need to know that the reason, and it was, for me, my pivotal point was that I came out of a job and realised that, no, I've got to work on the business. This won't happen. Yeah. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, and certainly even with mine. Yeah, so while, if I do get involved every now and then with estimating a job, but I'm actually a bit nervous about doing it because I'm not doing it as often as my guys. So yeah, I do get exactly where you're at. And we've been going through that. Yeah, we're 10 now. So it's been over the last few years I've sort of had to go through that and trying to basically develop the skills within the team so it can sustain itself without me having to be on it sort of hands-on the whole time.
Which is hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's definitely. At least you know you're a bit nervous doing it. I don't. I think I can still do it all. So that's the worst part, So.
And I think it doesn't matter what sort of business you're in, that you're actually going to go through that. So whether you're an architect, with us being a QS, being a builder, it's that growth, just managing your way through those changes. And I think, your military analogy is really quite relevant. So if you're a lieutenant, you might have been I don't know if it happens, but you might have been a corporal at some point. You can't go back to doing corporal things because it just isn't going to work. And so we've got to learn as businesses, as you step up, we're business owners, there's things that you've got to drop off.
That's it. And it becomes, and the reality of it that military do really well is that the military continues whether you're there or not.
Yeah, everybody's replaceable.
Exactly. And that's it's quite a good thing to go back on your own business and reset it, because sometimes you lose key people and think your whole business is going to collapse. You're going to have to go back on the tools. I'm going to have to do all the reality is that there are good people out there that can step into the breach. Yeah,
it might be a bit painful. They may end up being a different fit to what the previous one was, but there's a solution there. It's not having thought myself being irreplaceable several times in my career and realised I wasn't.
Yeah, we've all been there.
So with their business then, any areas that you particularly operate in or any types of building that you prefer to do?
Yeah, we with the current climate that's happening at the moment, we've kind of we're really lucky that we did a lot of alteration work anyway and renovation, high end normally. And it's a good place to be, we think, because people who have been in a home and have a little bit of money to spend normally are in those high-end areas. So they either go two things. We build a new house somewhere else or we make this place better. And thanks to COVID, a lot of people lived in their houses and know what they didn't like and wanted to make it better. So, and a lot of people sat on that and thought, well, we'll wait until we're ready and then we'll do that. So I enjoy the challenge of making an alteration or a renovation not an alteration and a renovation. I like that seamless look, whether it's a villa or it's an ex-state house, whatever it might be, is to make it look as seamless as possible.
So it looked like it could have been built that way.
Exactly. People would have to sit there and actually scratch of where did the old house start and finish. And that to me is really exciting, and I really like that whole part of the business. We also do a lot of what we used to do, so not so much at the moment because not around, but high-end new builds. And we'll no doubt do more when they come online again, but they're just not as many around. Certainly, I'm really, really happy that we didn't just rely on those new builds, that we did actually have our arm of doing residential and alterations and renovations, because it's that market has been our saviour in the last sort of 3 years.
Yeah, we were sort of probably 50-50 new build renovations. I think the last time I looked, it was about 70-30 new build renovations. But the new build bit of it that's held up is actually that high end. So I'd say our average new build price has gone from 800 to $1 million to a couple of mil. Like the ones that we're doing tend to be quite big.
Yes.
And I guess that end that's got the money has still got the money, whereas the average middle that's where it's been pretty tough over the last few years.
Yeah, the tight squeeze in the middle.
So you're chair of Certified Builders. How long have you been involved with them?
So I started off in their first year that they started.
Right.
So it's
so you're a foundation member, or
yes, I'm a foundation member.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was good. And we certainly it's been going for 27th year we're in now, and so
1999, 98.
Yeah. No, I might be wrong on that one. Actually, it could be 98. 98. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, but
late 90s.
Yeah. And it was interesting. How it started was that we really wanted a whole group of guys wanted to push the value of doing your apprenticeship. That was it. So that the trade qualifications stood out above everything. And the guy who actually started it funny enough, was with master builders, but decided to go labour only. And master builders at that time, you couldn't be a master builder if you were a labour only builder. So he got really annoyed with that, and basically, in a very simplistic version, was that he started up certified builders in Tauranga, and that's why our head office is in Tauranga. That's
where he was.
That's where he was, and it started off from there. And he had a group of real passionate builders who thought like-minded like that. So we need an organisation, and then it just grew from there.
So it must have been pretty hard getting a member organisation going from scratch. So how do they go about getting people aware of it, getting people involved in it?
I think what they really did was they really went out to the market and said, if you are trade qualified, we want to, make that a minimum requirement to belong to this association. And that really resonated with a lot of people really quickly, because they'd done their apprenticeship and they were like, well, if I don't need to be qualified as such to join master builders, but I need to be qualified to join certified builders. So I resonated with that and it took off. It was a slow burn to start with. And it wasn't until we got our first CE on board where he took it to the next level and was able to spread the word, get around and really spread it.
So, how long after the starting it was that, roughly?
Well, it was probably 3 years.
Okay.
Because it was like just getting out there and getting around, and the one thing that they've done really well is that we've got 22 regions, right from the far north down to Invercargill, and even in those early days we had members from, but not big teams, but members around the area, and we thought it was really important to have representation across the whole country. And we still have that today. We have the 22 presidents, we have all these different groups, and it's really good because you get a feel for the market from top to bottom. So it's really, really important. And a lot of those smaller areas were sort of left alone and sort of didn't feel part of a team. And when it really took off was when they decided to have their conferences. Okay. And I'm saying conference really loosely here, okay, because it was basically just a whole lot of lads meeting up to have a beer in a town and go and do some sort of golf or activity, and got together. Thought, wow, that was a lot of fun. What a great organisation, and then it sort of built from there, and it grew momentum from like-minded people actually. Because if you remember back in those days, you'd never speak to another builder about what you were doing because you were worried they were trying to steal your work. Yeah. But it was one of the people that I met and are still friends to this day was a guy from Wellington, and I could openly talk to him about the challenges that I had in the industry. I'm having trouble trying to work this out and work that out, and how do I do this? And we could share those ideas, and knowing that we were miles apart. But there was no internet, there was no linking of like-minded people outside of your little town. And the only other time you got to meet people was at a trade event, like a placemaker's breakfast or something, because you never said anything because you're worried jeepers. He might try and tend to the work if he knows I've got it. So that's kind of how that whole industry started, that like-minded people that were not necessarily in the same place to actually get going.
What sort of number of members does the organisation have now?
So we're pretty close to 3,000 business members. So, if you take on an average that every one of those are hiring a minimum sort of, 2 to sort of 6 people, that gets up there quite a few. It's changed. It's 16 employees. We've got an office in Tauranga, office in Wellington, and it's certainly it's a bigger beast now than what it has been for a long time, and it makes it challenging.
But I get from the sound of it, if you've got 22 regions and only 16 employees, it's still pretty heavily sort of volunteer supported, so that regional support and the regional presidents and the like, I guess, are all volunteers. I guess you're a volunteer as the chair.
It's the backbone of our organisation is to have these 22 committees that are around. They run some magnificent events. They do a whole lot and give a whole lot back to their local communities. And you did right. Without those, you are lost. And it's a real important part of our ethos that we keep hold of these areas and that we have that input. Because, while, Auckland's booming, is it booming in Taranaki? Yeah. Is it booming wherever? And we can, in a phone call, ring up and get that information, which is really important for everybody to see where it's going. So
Yeah, so I'm the Auckland chair of the Institute of Quantity Surveyors, which is another industry member organisation, and we haven't got quite as big an office. I think there's 4 or 5 in our head office, and yeah, one of the challenges we have in the Auckland region is we're basically trying to run events for members, is sort of getting that member engagement and working out what our members need from us. So how does Certified approach that?
No different. It's difficult. It's not so bad in...
I was hoping to get some good advice.
Yeah. Before I was the chair, I was the Auckland president for a long time, and we did some really good initiatives, but you have to really keep on reinventing stuff. Like we do things like we decided that we realised that families were missing out, and you try and get people to come along to family days. So why don't we have free tickets to the zoo for your families, and free tickets to Kelly Tarleton's, and that was just to get families to know, hey, actually, we're not alone. Our partners are always out doing stuff at all odd hours, and feels like we get less and less time together. And we did those sort of events to bring people together to discuss stuff. But Auckland being such a long, stretched out place, it's really difficult. We do a thing where they try and move it around, and they have beer burger night, and they try and get people around and talk, and they'll have a guest speaker. But you're not wrong when you think that Auckland has nearly 1,000 members of our organisation. It's very tough to actually get them all to sit around or get them involved. And everyone's in for a different reason. Everyone joins an organisation, as you would well know, at a different part of their journey for a different reason. So it's going to be interesting because we've got our conference in Auckland this year at the new centre. So it's been a long time out of Auckland. Hasn't been here for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see how we all, what the uptake is. They're they're normally really well received and really good, but it'd be nice to see a few more Auckland members along. So
what do you think, what's the important things that you think Certified Builders does for its members? So where does it create value? So we talked a bit about social stuff and that interaction, but what's the sort of main drivers as to why people would want to be a member of Certified Builders? Yeah,
and I think it's funny that we talk about the social stuff because the younger generation is becoming less, if not more. Like it's really hard to get people to meet. They're happy to do stuff online and talk that way, but it's a little more difficult. But you did right. So, I mean, the key things is when I was, the president of Auckland, I said, if I can save one house, one marriage, or one business, job done. And I certainly believe that having contracts is a big pull. Right? It's huge to have a contract which you pay for a small amount when you use it. It's a huge benefit for our members rather than trying to go to a lawyer and get one made up. And this is, it's updated regularly. And when those contracts too, they're all for different types of projects. You've also got from hiring staff, all those sort of agreements are all there. And that's a fairly big part. Another big part, of course, is the Halo 10-year guarantee, which is, well, obviously we'll talk a little bit later down the track a bit, but that's a big pull as well to actually know that you will get that if you're a member of our organisation. And another big thing is our learnings. We have at National Support Office a team that's dedicated to actually we make and do things as far as learn about accountancy, learn about legal. We have a 15-minute free legal spiel if you're in trouble. We have a 15-minute free accountancy. If the IRD's changing, you can probably go and see these people. And that's a fairly new one, the accounting one, which has been really well received. Because like we said before, and it's the same in our association, is that when our members get into trouble, it's very rarely about the building. It's about the business. Yeah. Very rarely about the building. So, and when do they become more interactive with the membership? When they've been in trouble. And then after that, they go, I need to come along to a few more of these because they realise they just got past that one by the skin of their teeth. So I guess the role is important for them to realise the opportunity there. You basically want to learn about it ahead of time. So and we're doing things now
avoid the problem rather than
that's it. But we don't though. Human race. Yeah. We're a hard case, aren't we? But but certainly we now have that part of the new membership is that you have to do some of these training.
Oh, okay, right.
So you come on board. You're in for 1 year probation. You got to do a couple of these trainings. And it's because it's important. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So sort of back to our journeyman discussion, is there sort of forcing a bit of that learning as part of coming on board?
Yeah. And if you and you are kind of forcing it to a degree. But I've heard all those that have ever done that course have gone, God, that's a great course. It's really good that we do that. So
it's good. Yeah. So coming back to apprenticeships then, do you currently have any apprentices in your team?
Yeah. We do. I've had apprentices all the time. I'm a firm believer in apprentices. They, one thing is that our organisation of New Zealand Certified Builders can't continue unless we have apprentices, because you've got to have the trade base. But for me, it gave me a really good opportunity to actually make a living for my family and put me in good stead. Yeah. And I think it's a good thing for young people.
So what do you think of the state of apprentices generally across the building industry? What's your view of that?
Been through a lot of change. Tipu King has closed up, it opened up, it closed up. I really believe that with the new way of training, where the trades are going to actually have a lot more input to training their apprentices, is a really good thing, because no one knows what the end user requires more than the people at the front. So they are listening, which I think is really, really important. Because the problem with apprentices is that you looked at the tool apprentice in 1998 had to have the same tools that I had back in the 80s, sort of thing. And yet here we are measuring stuff with electronic gear, and everything's cordless, and so things have changed. But we were very that's it, apps galore. Everything's on an app, but we don't. Our apprentices are still doing things the older way for a while. They're starting to get there now, and they're starting to really turn with it. But no, I think the biggest problem we've got is that the employers of apprentices don't really get the help that they require to train them. They put a lot of time and effort into training apprentices, and they can kind of feel like it's a bit of a chore, rather than it's actually what they're doing is actually providing for the future.
Because I guess it takes a while before you get productivity. And I guess back in the old days, you could pay people less when they were younger and less experienced. And now in recent years, you got the minimum adult wage, you're sort of immediately onto that. So I guess all of that impacts is the sort of cost benefit of having to train somebody.
It's a flip side, because I firmly believe that the youth today learn faster than what the youth did of yesterday. They're very fast learners. You get people who want to do an apprenticeship after going to, year 13, and you think, really? Cheapest, in those days it was bursary year, that you went off and did other things, but they decided to do it. So you get some really smart people coming through the trades, and they do learn really, really quickly. I think the days, there are still a few around, but the days of using them for cheap labour is kind of long gone, I believe, because they are the first to, they do their paperwork. They get it done real quick, and they're really good at it. And the moderators are having to really keep up with them. And it's a different type of people, and it's great for I think overall for the apprentice that's in a small business and that's learning. I think that that our industry is in a good space. We don't have enough coming through. Right. That's the problem. Yeah. And I don't know how you change.
So is that enough people wanting to do it, or enough businesses making space available?
Both. And building is hard on your body. It's hard. We've got lots of them want to become engineers and quantity surveyors and and electricians and that. But the plumbing in the building is actually generally hard work. So and I think now the things we have in place for our younger people, if you're dyslexic, if you've got any of those learning issues, boy, they've got everything there for you to carry on. And back in the day, if you had a learning disability, you were just called thick. That was it.
A whack around the head.
That's it. Hurry up and do it. Now they've got everything that they require, and therefore they aren't at a disadvantage. And in fact, we've got an apprentice at the moment, and his attention to detail is phenomenal. And I think that that definitely we need to make it, incentivize it somehow, so that one, we have more apprentices that want to be in the trades, and we have more employers that are happy to take them and train them. That's the trick.
Yeah, I guess, to some degree, all this hype around AI may actually play into the benefit of practical industries, because us knowledge workers definitely have got AI over our shoulder. Whether it's going to get there or not, I don't know. But if you're building stuff, it's going to be, a long time before robots are doing what a builder does.
Exactly. I think it's a safe trade to get in at the moment. There's a lot of like you hear of AI is taking the place of a lot of workplace people in whole different industries. You even hear of accountants and lawyers that all that base work that their graduates in first years did is all being done by something else, and but our apprenticeships are in all the trades, I think is pretty good. I think it's a good place to be in.
So starting to lift up a little bit and sort of tap into your knowledge at the industry level. So we've had the government talking about this jointly and severally liable change. So currently the way it works, of my understanding of it, is everybody that's involved in a project, if it turns to custard, the people can go after the whole lot, and jointly and severally liable means effectively the last man standing cops the whole lot, which invariably is the council. So the jointly and severally liable change is talking about you'll be if you're responsible for a portion of the project, your exposure is that portion of the project. But that's going to change the landscape quite a lot with things. So what's your thoughts around that, and what sort of discussions have you been involved in around that?
Lots of discussions. Spoke to the minister and helped with a little bit of advice on it in the early stages particularly. There's two schools of thought. The big part is that the council are predominantly the last person standing, and they end up taking the whack for most of it. Right? So therefore, people believe that the council are really strict on inspections. They kind of won't let anything slide because they're worried they're going to be the last person standing, which is basically...
So they sort of become the underwriter of the building industry.
They do. And that's you and I.
Yeah, which isn't really their role. And like you say, it's basically getting funded in our rates. So
that's right.
Spreading that cost across to everybody, which, I'm not entirely convinced is the right thing.
No, and I think people believe that because of that is why red tape and inefficiencies run. And that's the government of today is saying that, why does it take so long? Why does an average house have 13 inspections? Doesn't need 13 inspections and all that sort of stuff. So I think that they're going to set the limit of what is the most exposure that the councils are going to be up for, right? So let's just pick a number. Let's say, hey, they're going to be up for 35%, right? Then the rest of it is going to be done by an assurance or a guarantee.
Well, if at that the level, rest of it's going to be the responsibility of the different people doing the bits, which effectively would probably then they'd need insurance to be able to cover it, because otherwise they can just go under and that's that chunk gone.
Yeah. And as we've discovered from the leaky building era, we're still paying for that today, and homeowners are still paying for that today. A month doesn't go by where we hear about a homeowner who's just discovered their house is a leaker, and it's causing them all sorts of grief, and of course they can't go on to anybody because they've done the old wrapped up the company that's named after the street that the house was built on, or the development was built on, so they're trying to work from that as well. I believe that having almost a compulsory insurance scheme or a guarantee scheme for everyone that does it is a good thing, because it protects the homeowner. Yeah. And there is always someone going to be there at the end, or there's a lot better chance that the people are going to be there at the end when it happens. Do I think in the early stages that means that there'll be a lot less red tape from councils? No, I don't. They've still got a government legislation that they have to abide by. But I look back at when I started my apprenticeship on a house, and it was 3 pages. I look now, and it's probably minimum of 12 pages if you're lucky. Does it make the bill any better? No, it doesn't. But I think that we need to really work out who, at the end of the day, is left liable, and it can't always be just the council. So my belief is that it's a good thing. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And people are saying, oh, yes, but it means that there's only sort of master builders, certified builders, and Stanfords are the only 3 that are offering at the moment. The industry is divided. The residential industry is divided a third of master builders, a third of certified builders, and a third of what we call unwashed. Don't belong to anybody. Right? Those ones that are unwashed, 50% of them have no reason. They could belong to either organisation if they so decided. If they decide, we're going to do it. So the remaining 50% that can't belong to any organisation, do you want them building your home? Is that do you think that you're going to run into trouble with that 50%? I would think so. And that's the minister's point of view, is that they're probably very good builders, but maybe they should work for someone else that can actually do that back end well. Yeah. So I understand what they're saying for that protection, to try and get rid of the cowboys and all that sort of thing. I think, did they go far enough? I would have liked them to have, said that you have to have a, compulsory loss of deposit. Because that's another big thing, which builders
go bust. Yeah.
They go bust and they've got your deposit in hand and you get nothing back. So there's those that think we should do more. There's those that think we should do less because they think that it's creating an old boys club by doing that. I believe we've got it about right because at the end of the day, if we thought you were going to have an opt-out clause. I really thought the government was going to say, here, have an opt-out clause, and that. Like he said to me, was that opt-out clause, if you've got a builder that comes to you and says, I can't get any insurance anywhere, but I'll build you a house, and you tick a box to say, that's all right, I'm happy not to have insurance, I think you'd be a brave homeowner, to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we do quite a bit of work in Aussie, and I'd say that a lot of the consent documentation is like it was 10 or 20 years ago here in New Zealand. Yeah. And sort of my understanding of it is that the assumption is that the builder knows how to build it, so we don't give them the details. But from our point of view, when we're costing it, if we've got a set of details to work off, it makes it a lot easier for us. Instead of us having to guess how the builder might do it, it's explicit for everybody. And so I think the more detail we get in our consenting documentation is actually of value to the industry. So for experienced guys like you, it probably doesn't make any difference because you would have done it that way anyway. But for less experienced people and for us that they're having to guess how you think and how you're going to do it, it makes it explicit. So I think our level of documentation is actually pretty good from what I've seen.
I think ours is really good. I couldn't believe I was in Adelaide just over a month ago, and I knew a guy had done his apprenticeship in building. He still cuts his own frames. He said they're just starting to get to pre-nails just coming in, and they're all worried that it's going to take all their jobs. And I'm like, really? I was quite blown away that he could cut and pitch his roofs really, really well. Yeah. But yeah, so you wonder, like you said, of those earlier plans, it was too far one way, So I think where we've landed up is quite good. I think we've got good level of documentation because when we go back to those first apprentices who actually go and do their first build, and in the old days they weren't given, they relied on us to tell them how to do things. Where now they can, and what is really good is they can actually look up in Google, this is the best practice to use Axon panel, for argument's sake, and it gives them verbatim how to do it, which is really, really good on all those products.
Yeah. So another thing that's sort of talked about at that government level is builders signing off their own work. So I don't know what the stats are for how many inspections pass and how many fail, but I'm sure there's a reasonable portion that fail. So council are actually performing a role in picking up things, which if a builder's able to sign off, how's that sort of QA process that the councils actually deliver going to be ensure that we don't drop the standards of what's happening and provide issue or create issues for people in the future?
Yeah, well, we ran that by our members, and well and truly, our members want to have inspections. They don't want to sign it off. They just want to have another set of eyes look at it. Yeah. Right? And I think the biggest problem that they didn't like was that to book an inspection at the peak of everything could take 2 weeks, right? That was the issue. The issue of having an inspection and an inspector
and it's
look at it.
$200 or whatever the cost is. It's
nothing. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's having the extra set of eyes look over it. Most of our members go, cheapers, it's a lot of responsibility to take on, you signing off a job because you've got nowhere to go and especially if you're like myself, you're a company and someone on site is doing it, you don't see it, and they all tell you they've done it as per the plan. It's us.
Yeah,
we get that signed off. So you're somewhat problematic on that front. I think that there was talk of having some of the lesser inspections, like to me, insulation, right? Insulation in a building job now is normally done by someone who's a professional at it because they're faster, they're more efficient, and they actually do it all the time, so they're great. And to have a council inspector to come on and have a look at insulation, a PS3 would be fine from them. Also a little bit of a bugbear, I suppose, is if an engineer designs something and says, I'm having a look at this foundation. I've never had a building inspector ever change it because they're liable for it, so they don't ever change it. But why do we have to have the engineer and then get the building inspector here afterwards? And they'll say, oh, that's to check the hole. Surely we can get the engineer to check the hole. I mean, he's a qualified
engineer.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So that double up of inspections is another frustration. So I don't know about being the total sign-off of it. But there are some things we could be a lot sharper at.
Yeah, so there's room to refine it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there were talk about having your LBP Class 3, that only certain people who qualified could sign off work. There was talk about that, but that's a long way down the track, I believe. Yeah. But there are some really simple wins to stop having so many inspections. Everyone that I've spoken to says, you want your final and you want your pre-line and stuff. Yes, absolutely, to check with your bracing and stuff. Why would you change?
Yeah. And if you've got an engineer checking the major structural elements that they've designed and issuing a PS3 or a PS4 or whatever, then...
And photos.
Yeah.
We've all got photos. We can take logs of it all. So I don't think that... I think there is room to... And it's all it is that it's not so much the $200 cost. It's the lead time of getting... I can ring an engineer up this morning, and he would probably be there if he knew I was pouring concrete the next day. He'd come in, that next day. I can't do that with council. I have to wait, and that's the problem. So
so it's more of a logistics thing than the actual inspection itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting that I researched it a bit in the UK a few years ago and was talking over there, and the councils there take much more of a back seat through the construction process. So they have this whole planning thing. So you've got to get planning approval, which I think is roughly equivalent to our resource consent. But basically, once you've got planning approval, you get on with it. And it's actually the insurers that do the inspections because they're the ones effectively underwriting the quality and the fact that the building complies or not. And the councils are saying to me, if somebody identified an issue, all they'd do is write a letter to the builder or to the homeowner and say, we're aware of this issue, you've got to sort it out. So they're not actually directly involved, and you can pretty much have a project completed and the council's had nothing to do with it. It's much more insurance driven. So do you think we're heading that way, or are we going to end up with a bit of a
I don't think we'll ever head that way totally. And because the problem is
because that's pretty much putting it all to the market.
Yeah, and I think you'll have a look when we had our Halo set up, and we were underwritten by Lloyds Bank, and then Lloyds Bank got right out of that whole market for that very reason. They were so exposed.
Aussie, the insurance was compulsory, and they had issues with the insurers pulling out.
They did. All around the world. France was the same. It was it was a really big issue of trying to find underwriters because everyone was getting burnt, and it was really tough to do that. So I don't think we ever want to go down that track. I think that having like we do a 10-year guarantee, which will guarantee after you're finished, having all the councils do their inspections beforehand, I think, and having the right amount of the responsibilities from councils and builders and everyone else that's involved, I think is the right way to go. I think that we don't want to. The advantage of us not doing too much too quick, which you often wonder if that's an advantage, but you can actually look at what Australia does, what England does, what Canada does, and pick the best of it. And I kind of think that we would be at a loss if we left it to because the problem being is, imagine if you had all the houses insured and then the underwriter decided to leave, who would cover all those houses that might have 5 years left on their on their guarantee and that, and they're all, and even if they're doing foundation work, well, it's a 50-year guarantee, and it's pretty tough, isn't it? Yeah,
and if you've got a 50-year guarantee on structure or whatever, if the company's not there in 20 years' time, then the 50-year guarantee
doesn't mean anything, does it?
Pretty much irrelevant. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how it all pans out with that. So they're not looking to make insurance compulsory. So like for us as a QS, we've got PI insurance, but it isn't compulsory. We don't have to have it. I'm not sure with the designers. I suspect it's similar with them that they don't have to have it. So really should there be more compulsory insurance? And certainly should homeowners be more aware of who's actually insured through their process and who isn't?
Yeah, I think definitely what the government's pushed forward is that you got to have a 10-year guarantee on your build of your project, which I think is
which for a 100-year asset.
Yep. But like you say, once you get out of residential and start getting things into the bespoke area, you're going to be in a lot of trouble to get anyone to insure it because they're all on the very edge of, and who would have thought they're building, really close to cliffs 20 years ago.
It was a bad idea,
It was a bad idea with the great view, and all that sort of stuff. So I think insurance in our business is our biggest overhead. Everything we have is covered by insurance, but you did right. There are some people out there with no insurance. They don't even insure their tools or their vehicles, never mind the task that they're doing. So yes, you need to make sure that you do have the appropriate insurances. Most banks are pretty good. If you're going through a bank, they kind of have a lot of that coverage and expect a lot of that coverage, and they want proof of it. But yeah, that's a tough question, because you don't want to end up having your P&G being so expensive, taken up by insurances of stuff that might not happen. And the problem we've got in New Zealand is that how we build in Wellington is very different to how we build in Northland. And that's, so it's tricky. It really is. So I don't think there's no simple answer to that one. But they've certainly been down that track and tried to. And this 10-year is a start, and we all need to grapple with that. It's a start for those sort of, and it doesn't matter the size or the complexity. It's going to have to be insured. So,
and I guess for builders, they probably need to make sure that the professionals in particular that they're working with, and I guess the sub-trades as well, actually have insurance, because if the jointly and severally liable comes in and it's a piece of the pie that the builder's going to be responsible for, if they're relying on an architect or an engineer or a plumber or whatever that piece, they want to make sure that they're not going to be carrying the can if that crowd can close up without having an insurance behind it.
That's it. And it becomes to the old due diligence, and unfortunately our industry loves to get things quoted and go to the cheapest price, but and then when things go wrong, they don't understand why it's gone wrong. So I think the education to the homeowner is really important, that this asset, if you go to the cheapest person, might have no coverage or very little coverage. And if you go for the mid-range, they'll have the coverage or something like that. I think the big piece is educating the homeowner of this. If you don't do it correctly and don't get the right advice, you could be left really exposed, because the council isn't going to be there to help you.
It's understanding risk, isn't it? So what risk am I taking on? And I think it is, when you look at some of the issues at Fletcher's and some of these big projects here, a lot of it's around risk, is sort of where the risk is sitting, and is that risk sufficiently mitigated, and whether insurance is part of mitigating it, or whether the business processes or whatever. So being aware of risk and managing and understanding just what risk you're taking on. So both as homeowners and as building business owners.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big part of it.
So the last thing I've got on my list of things to talk about is the cyclical nature of the building industry. So we've touched on a little bit how it's been pretty tough going over the last few years. We had the crazy time through COVID, which was pretty unusual. I think before that, it actually was an unprecedented period of stability.
Yeah.
We had probably 8 years or something of maybe even longer, 10 years of relatively stable, regular amount of work. And one theory I've had, which I'd be interested in your opinion on, is that the building industry is consistently underperformed in productivity against other sectors. I touched on the project nature of it, which I think does create a bit of a waviness. But I think how the government and Reserve Bank manage the economy has an effect on it as well. And so when you've got an economy that's doing going up and down, it's very difficult as a business trying to invest in R&D, capital, whatever, to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your business. If 1 minute you're struggling to catch up, the next minute you're wondering whether you're going to be able to make the payroll. I guess what's your thoughts of the cyclical nature of the industry, and you got any magic answers to fix it?
Certainly, there used to be, every 6 to 7 years there's going to be a downturn. That was that was sort of the given rule. And I've been through a few. And the first one, when I said I came back from England, I thought that was the worst one. It was terrible. I was like, "Sheesh, I could be a security guard."
That was more than just the building industry as well. The late 90s with the whole Rogernomics and the restructuring of our economy. The rural economy was tanking. So it was
a terrible time. I was working as a security guard at night, and I was able to earn the same amount as building. It was like there was just no rhyme nor reason of what had happened. Then we went through a couple more, the GFC and all that, and it didn't
the Asian crisis.
That's right, and it didn't really affect the building industry. So the building industry sort of did reasonably well. They kind of didn't go for that big low again until this one. This one has affected the building industry hugely.
I've heard, we've lost 16,000 jobs in the building industry?
And that wouldn't surprise me. And it's, there's a whole host. Everyone can say, we weren't productive enough. We did this and did that. It's a twofold thing. We had all of a sudden we seem to go along. We haven't got enough labour. So instead of training our own, let's actually bring in a whole lot of labour. We're bringing all this labour in. It was a period of only probably 4 years ago. You could not get a tradesperson. Didn't matter who you were and what you were paying. You couldn't get them. So that's not healthy for any end of the market. It's just, and then now you can have any tradesman you want and
pay almost any
price you want. And, it's the opposite end. So, and I really don't, there's no magic answer of how can we smooth that out. Over the years, I've heard, well, why doesn't government keep a whole lot of projects sort of behind the scenes? And then when they see that we're in a lull like we are now, they start banging out state houses or defence houses or whatever it might be, or bridges, all that sort of stuff. And it all sounds easy and good because you think, well, why not? Because the end user being taxpayer is going to get better value for money. But we don't seem to do it. We seem to build, whenever there's a boom, the government decides to build new schools and new bridges and new everything, and it adds to the problem. And then where we are now, I firmly believe now is that this is a training environment. We know we're going to come out of this at some stage. Why aren't we training and getting apprentices halfway through their apprenticeship? And actually, so when we come out, we don't have to then go and do the same cycle of all of a sudden we're bringing in all these overseas people to fill spots. Let's try and do it ourselves. There's no easy answer. I don't know what. I mean, I'm sure if it was easy, there'd be one of these governments that have come in and gone out would have tried to tackle it. They haven't been able to. And you did right. I think it's a whole lot of cogs from different areas, but it's unhealthy. And how do you run a business where 1 minute you're tanking and the next minute you're making so much, but you can't afford to actually do finished jobs, and your name turns to mud because of that reason. And there's always a bit of a laugh in the industry. All these young guys who did their apprenticeship and they came out and they could get a job straight away, charge out huge money. All brought Ranger utes and they all look really flash. Now, go past Toyota, there's more Ranger utes for sale than you've ever seen. But, it's that whole thing of how do you even that out? Because it's not healthy for anybody. So I don't know how. I can't give you the magic bullet on that.
Do you have any idea whether it's similar in other countries, like the construction sector goes through the same or not? No, I haven't actually looked, to be honest.
Certainly.
Aussie's pretty similar to us, I think.
Yes, they can do. But the good thing about them is they're a big country. So they can always head off to another state. They can, if all of a sudden it's struggling in Sydney and they're digging out minerals out of somewhere else, they can all head there and they all seem to have work. But with us, the whole country gets affected, so it's tough. But but I'm sure, you hear when Ireland went through there, they got all these Polish workers came flying over, flooded over, and then took all the work off the Irish because they undercut everybody, and then they left at the end, and it was a disaster all around. So it does happen.
Yeah, so not necessarily unique to us.
No, definitely not. But how you fix that? I don't know. And at the same time, our population continues to grow, doesn't it? When you think, and they all need houses, and we bring. Refugees come over for very valid reasons, but they all need somewhere to live. We should be building those now.
So we're ready for the next one.
It is.
I appreciate the time you've taken talking with us. So any other burning issues or anything you want to raise that we haven't talked about yet? There's a lot more we could talk about.
Yeah, definitely. No, I just think there's a lot of issues out there, but it's a great industry. I've had apprentices that have come through that have gone on and become all sorts of different jobs. It's a great starting point. They've gone, some have gone off and become engineers, or they've gone off and done a whole host of different jobs. It's a great industry. I really think that it's undersold. It's the sun on your back and all that sort of thing is all good. You don't have a student loan and all that, but it is tough. There's no hiding about that. But it's certainly it's a good stepping stone for young people to get involved in. So for any listeners out there who've got probably got their sons and daughters who are out there, and we had a fantastic apprentice. She's now in Wellington and got did really, really well. Won the Auckland apprenticeship Trade Apprenticeship Awards Challenge. I think that get them involved. It is a great. It's a great industry to be involved in. It's exciting. No days are the same. Get them involved. It's not all that bad.
That's right. Well, thanks, Nick. So if you want a builder that's really passionate about the industry, if you want to know more about certified builders and what they can do for you, if you've got a son or daughter that wants to get involved with the industry, then talk to Nick from Edgecity Building. If you want a QS who really understands building and is interested in trying to improve how you operate and increase the success of your business, then come to talk to us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, then check below. Follow us on whatever channel you're watching this on, and you can get more of this sort of stuff. Thank you.